Welcome to Shadow Mind, the space where your mind meets its mirror and your soul gets a little uncomfortable. Today, we are stepping into a place few dare to enter willingly. Not the light, not the love, not the curated self. No. Today, we talk about the shadow, the version of you that lurks just beneath your surface smile, the version of you that you've exiled, denied, or simply feared. This is not about becoming better. This is about becoming whole. Within each of us lies a part we'd rather not see, the part hidden behind the polite smile, the I'm fine, the curated image of who we think we should be. That part is the shadow self, as Carl Jung named it. The shadow isn't evil. It's not your enemy. It's simply everything you've exiled from your identity. It's the rage you were punished for as a child. The envy you were told is ugly. The fear you were taught to suppress. The sexual desire you were shamed for. The ambition you were told was selfish. It is formed when you begin to edit yourself, to be accepted, to be loved, to belong. Piece by piece, you disconnect from who you are in favor of who you are expected to be. But what is repressed doesn't disappear. It festers. It leaks out in passive aggression, projection, self-sabotage, addictions, and destructive patterns. And worst of all, you often don't even know it's happening because the shadow lives in the unconscious. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The shadow isn't just the parts you hate. It's the parts you fear. And until you meet them with honesty, they'll keep showing up in the people you judge, the situations you repeat, and the chaos you can't explain. Shadow work doesn't start with fixing yourself. It starts with facing yourself and asking, what have I locked away in the dark, and why am I so afraid to look at it? The shadow doesn't appear out of nowhere. It is constructed, piece by piece, through your earliest relationships, cultural conditioning, and the unspoken rules of survival. As children, we learn quickly what parts of us are acceptable and what parts must be buried. Show too much anger? You're labeled difficult. Cry in public? You're weak. Speak up? You're arrogant. Desire too much? You're selfish. Question authority? You're dangerous. So what do? We adapt. We shrink. We hide. Not because we are weak, but because we are wired to belong. Rejection meant emotional death to the child. So we cut off pieces of ourselves to stay safe, to be good, to be liked, to be loved. But those pieces don't die. They slip into the unconscious and begin to operate from the shadows. The result? You become a fragmented version of yourself. You perform goodness while resentment brews underneath. You chase success while fearing failure like a ghost in your chest. You smile at others while secretly loathing parts of them, parts that mirror what you denied in yourself. This is how the shadow shapes your life. It drives your compulsions, your projections, your deepest insecurities, all while you believe you're in control. And this is the tragedy. What you suppress, you eventually become, just in distorted, unconscious ways. Until you face your shadow, you're not truly choosing your life. You're being driven by the very forces you've tried to escape. The first step to freedom is recognizing you didn't become this way by accident. But now, you get to choose whether you stay that way. The shadow is not only a personal phenomenon. It exists on two levels, the individual and the collective. And to fully understand its power, you must learn to see both. Your personal shadow is shaped by your upbringing, your wounds, your culture, your traumas. It's the accumulation of traits you've disowned in order to survive in your specific environment. Maybe you grew up in a home where emotions were punished, so you buried your sensitivity. Maybe you were constantly compared, so you disowned your ambition or masked it as humility. Maybe love was conditional, so you became the perfect child, even if it meant betraying your truth. But beyond your personal history, there is a collective shadow, formed by the unconscious of the society you live in. It's what an entire culture chooses to suppress, deny, and project. Think of how societies glorify certain ideals, strength over vulnerability, logic over emotion, conformity over individuality. These ideals create mass repression. As a result, entire groups are marginalized, silenced, demonized. Racism, misogyny, homophobia, classism. These are not just social issues, they are collective shadows. They emerge when a society projects its disowned fears and insecurities onto others, labeling the other as dangerous or inferior. When people blindly follow propaganda, when nations scapegoat minorities, when fear becomes law, the collective shadow is in control. And here's the crucial insight. The personal and the collective feed each other. If you haven't faced your own shadow, you'll unconsciously participate in the collective one. You'll justify cruelty. You'll laugh at injustice. You'll stay silent when silence is complicity. But when you begin to see your own darkness, you recognize it in the world. You stop pointing fingers. You start taking responsibility. Healing the shadow isn't just about becoming a better person. It's about becoming a more conscious participant in humanity. Because the world doesn't change when we shame others into silence. It changes when enough people face their own shadows and choose to act with clarity instead of projection. To integrate the shadow is not to fix yourself, it's to reclaim yourself. The parts of you that you've rejected, suppressed, or feared don't disappear. They wait in the dark. Not to destroy you, but to be acknowledged, understood, and brought into the light of awareness. Integration begins when you stop running from your discomfort and start asking deeper questions. Why does this trigger me? Why do I keep repeating this pattern? What am I pretending not to feel? Most people live as half-selves, overly identified with their light, their curated personality. But wholeness requires that you bring both light and shadow into your awareness. Not to act out every dark impulse, but to own them. For example, acknowledging your envy doesn't mean you become spiteful. It means you explore what your envy is pointing to: a desire, a feeling of inadequacy, an unlived part of you crying out for expression. Integration is about creating inner honesty. When you say, "Yes, I do feel rage," instead of pretending to be above it, that truth grounds you. When you say, "I am afraid to fail," you're no longer controlled by unconscious perfectionism. When you admit, "I can be manipulative, jealous, judgmental," you reclaim the power to choose something different because you're no longer in denial. Unintegrated shadow traits don't go away. They act out through projection, blame, passive aggression, or self-sabotage. But once integrated, they become energy, insight, and even wisdom. This is the work of true self-awareness, bringing what is unconscious into consciousness and holding it not with shame, but with responsibility. It's not glamorous. It's not instant. It doesn't always feel good. But it's real, and it's freeing. Because the moment you stop pretending to be only the light, you become whole, and only the whole self can live fully, love deeply, and lead authentically. To integrate the shadow is to stop fearing who you are and to finally meet the person you've always been underneath the mask. When people hear the word shadow, they often think of darkness, the ugly, shameful, destructive parts of human nature. But the shadow is not just a container for your wounds or unwanted traits. It also holds your gold. Yes, your shadow contains not only what you fear, but also what you've forgotten, buried, or were too afraid to become. Maybe you were told as a child not to show off, so you buried your natural charisma. Maybe you were called too sensitive, so you shut down your empathy. Maybe you were punished for speaking out, so you hid your voice, your power, your truth. These are not flaws. These are gifts turned into ghosts. This is what Jung meant when he said, "The gold is in the dark." Inside your shadow lie your repressed strengths, your wild creativity, your intuitive knowing, your boldness, your passion, your sexuality, your leadership. The parts of you that were never nurtured, never welcomed, or scared others because they were too raw, too free, too powerful. So the work of shadow integration is not just about healing, it's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. The rebel you silenced may be your inner innovator. The anger you feared may be your inner boundary. The ego you judged may be your unapologetic confidence. This is the paradox. What you've been ashamed of may be the very thing that sets you free. What you've suppressed may be the key to your purpose. And what you've feared in yourself may be the source of your deepest power. But you'll never find these gifts if you only seek light. You have to go into the cave, into the confusion, into the contradictions. Because true wholeness isn't about being perfect. It's about becoming real. And when you reclaim your shadow, you reclaim the parts of your soul that were never meant to be lost. Shadow work isn't theoretical. It's personal, messy, and deeply embodied. It's not something you read about and understand. It's something you practice, moment by moment. Here are some practical steps to begin the journey of meeting your shadow. 1. Journal with radical honesty. Don't journal to impress your future self. Write what's raw, what's real, what you're afraid to admit. Ask yourself uncomfortable questions. What triggers me the most and why? When do I feel fake or performative? Who do I secretly envy or judge, and what might that reflect in me? The goal isn't self-criticism. It's self-revelation. 2. Reflect on emotional reactions. Your strongest emotional responses, rage, jealousy, shame, are not random. They are signals. Each trigger is a doorway. When someone irritates you, ask, what part of me feels threatened? What am I defending? What part of myself do they represent? Often, what we hate in others is what we have disowned in ourselves. 3. Notice recurring patterns. Look at your life, your relationships, your choices. Are there patterns that repeat? Conflicts that return? Roles you can't escape? These are not coincidences. They are shadow cycles, unresolved parts of you trying to surface. Until you listen, they will repeat. When you recognize them, they begin to shift. 4. Track synchronicities and symbols. Pay attention to your dreams, your fantasies, the symbols that keep showing up in your life. The unconscious speaks in metaphor. What archetypes are you drawn to? What stories move you? The shadow often hides in art, myth, and coincidence. 5. Create a safe container. Shadow work is sacred, but it can also be overwhelming. Whether through therapy, trusted friendships, or somatic practices, create space where your inner world can be seen without judgment. This is not a race. It's a return to the parts of you left behind. The more honest you are, the more free you become. Because the goal of shadow work isn't to become better. It's to become whole, with all your complexity, contradiction, and truth intact. The shadow doesn't just live inside individuals. It lives in nations, religions, ideologies, and systems. What we repress personally, we also repress collectively, and the consequences echo through history. Wars don't begin with bombs. They begin with projection, when a society disowns its fear, greed, or rage and casts it onto the enemy. Genocide begins with a story, a myth that they are less human than us. Oppression is justified by laws, but born from unconscious shadow. We inherit more than just DNA. We inherit trauma, silence, prejudice, and guilt. Colonialism, slavery, the Holocaust, cultural erasure, these aren't just events in a history book. They are living shadows, unresolved, unspoken, still shaping the world today. When a culture refuses to face its past, it keeps repeating it. When a nation clings to its myths of purity or superiority, it blinds itself to its own violence. And when collective shadow is ignored, it festers in riots, in conspiracies, in extremist movements. This is why shadow work is not just self-help. It is social responsibility. Because healing your own wounds helps break the cycle. Because seeing your own projections makes you less likely to scapegoat others. Because facing your own darkness makes you less susceptible to the darkness of a mob. To do collective shadow work is to ask, what stories has my culture told me about us and them? What histories have been erased and why? Who benefits from our silence? It's not about guilt. It's about awareness, the kind that leads to action rooted in truth, not fear. Every society must eventually face its shadow or be consumed by it. Just like the individual, the collective must descend into its darkness to reclaim its soul. You are not separate from the world. The shadows you run from within are the same ones you see on the news. And maybe, just maybe, healing starts when enough people are willing to ask not just, what is wrong with the world? But, where does that live in me? The shadow isn't here to destroy you, it's here to reveal you. What you fear in yourself is often what you've been dying to reclaim. Wholeness doesn't come from perfection. It comes from radical self-honesty, from meeting the parts of you were told to hide and choosing to see them with open eyes. You are not broken. You are unfinished. Keep going into the dark, not to stay there, but to bring back the light only you can find. This is the work. This is the way. Become who you are afraid to be.